Are you feeling anxious, overwhelmed, and disenchanted by life, the universe, and everything? Maybe you're frustrated with the talking heads who say one thing and do something completely different. Yeah, me too. Welcome to People Watching, a podcast where we figure out what it looks like to become the role model we've always wanted by talking with real people who found real role models in their own lives. Together, we cut through all the noise and identify better sources of hope, creativity, and wisdom as we explore how we learn to make decisions about the kind of life we want to live. So join us. Let's do some people watching. This is your host, Megan J. Robinson. My guest today is Dr. Sandra Glahn, journalist and author, co-author, or editor of more than 20 books. Dr. Glahn is also professor of media arts and worship at Dallas Theological Seminary and the co-founder of a visual museum of women in Christianity. I first met Dr. Glahn when I took her course Writing for Publication while a student at DTS. She both terrified and encouraged me in equal measure because I thought I was a good writer before going into her class and quickly found out how much more I had to learn. Since leaving DTS, I followed Dr. Glahn's work with deep interest, especially as she's recently published Nobody's Mother, Artemis of the Ephesians and Antiquity in the New Testament, which connects ancient Ephesus and early church history to questions of gender in society and faith communities today. In our conversation, we explore the themes of representation, leadership, and the historical context of women in Christianity. I especially appreciated hearing Dr. Glahn speak on the challenges of power dynamics and leadership roles, and her emphasis on the importance of discernment, humility, and integrity in fostering genuine connections and relationships. This was such a fun and fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Welcome to part 2 of our conversation. Welcome to the studio. As we get started, I would love for us to go through touchstones for our conversation, expectations that can shape our time together for ourselves and for our listeners. So would you start us off by reading the first one?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Whatever we share is by invitation, not obligation. If either of us is not comfortable pursuing a topic, let's just say, I prefer not to share, thank you.
Thank you. And silence is also a partner in our conversation. Let's feel free to take a moment to reflect without immediately filling the space with words, and let's leave room for the inner teacher to whisper as well.
Be present as fully as possible. This is a space to acknowledge our doubts, fears, and failings as much as it is a space to share our joys, convictions, and successes.
And finally, let's ask open, honest questions. If we're not sure what the other meant in the question or statement, ask. It gives us a chance to clarify or rephrase. And by asking questions that we genuinely don't know the answer to, we allow room for surprise to be a great catalyst of insight. Awesome. So, one of the sites that I've been working on is actually called Catholic Women Preach.
Okay,
But
great.
it is so interesting because the sense that I always grew up with as someone not familiar with the Protestant church, which is probably how anyone who's outside of any organization
Right,
sees
yes.
it as a monolithic,
Right.
homogenous perspective, which it's never been. No
Never.
organization
Yeah.
ever is. And the
True.
Catholic Church really is not.
Really is not. For sure is not. Yeah.
But what's fascinating is to see how these faithful women
Mm.
are speaking and ministering within the Catholic Church and speaking
Right.
about their frustrations with positions that the Catholic Church has taken on various topics. And when you were talking about representation earlier, I actually was thinking about these women
Mm.
because I get to see women from Africa. I get to see women from the Philippines, not just
Yeah,
women
that's
from the
awesome.
US. And so
Yeah.
it's been a really interesting and lovely opportunity personally for
Mm.
me to be able to be reminded of just where Christianity can go and has gone and how it
Wow.
looks in different
You
places.
go, girl. You go, girl. That's awesome. How fun for you.
I know.
Wow.
It's been so interesting because um, I grew up in an independent fundamental Baptist church.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes,
A little bit of a character arc there for you. Just a little bit.
just a little bit. We
Just a
left
little
when I
bit.
was 17.
Okay.
And
Wow.
that and that was mainly because I kept going, "Why?"
Yeah.
My
Yes.
parents would go,
I
"Hmm,
don't know.
no."
Huh. Good question. Why didn't I ask that before?
Right. And, I grew up in an independent fundamental Baptist church, but, one of the things that well, I mean, representation, let's talk about that in the
Yeah.
independent fundamental church.
Or lack thereof. Okay. That's a short conversation.
But,
Short
yeah,
conversation.
yeah, short. But what's interesting to me is I grew up with that, but that perspective on gender and sexuality and
Mm.
roles was not formative or normative for me, which I really kind of attribute to my parents. I have to say.
Yeah.
Mom loved staying at home. She loved being a homemaker. My dad worked
Mhm.
outside the home. But it was very interesting because there were things that they did, and it was not because you're the wife, you do those things. It was because I like them and I'm good at them and
Yeah.
I can do it.
So looks the same, but for completely different reasons, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I would love to know, did you get with your research into the early church, with looking at these women, did that drive you to kind of like look further up the chain at gender and sexuality, or was your interest in gender and sexuality kind of driving you to look more specifically?
I did not expect the two to intersect, and it's been a very happy discovery. The women's history was really, I was thinking the history thing, and the
Sure,
gender and sexuality stuff was philosophy. Like, those are the three buckets in
sure,
my program. But they did have to intersect in that novel that I
sure.
wrote. But it was really a happy discovery to, because I didn't know anything about the super early church and women in the early church and the
Mm,
whole virginity thing, which was really bucking up against the empire. The
yeah,
number one cause of death for men is war. And so women are required to have a certain number of boys to keep the army going. I think you had to have an average of 5 kids just to keep the population like at zero change, right? War demands so many children. And so there are incentives built into the system in the Roman Empire that if you're a freeborn woman, here's your requirement to have kids. If you're emancipated, then you got to have an extra one. But still, you get some
mm,
freedom as a woman. It's given as an incentive to have children, which read the subtext of that. That must mean women wanted more freedom, which, you want to go, duh. But sometimes he gets taught like women were perfectly happy in their role of, producing children until Betty Friedan
yeah,
wrecked it all, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
sometimes it's like, yeah,
But
clearly not. They're
yeah,
motivated by a very painful death. Anyway, the point
yeah.
being,
But I'm also like, so I mean, if war was the number one cause of death for men, I would assume childbirth was right
exactly,
up there for women.
childbirth is the number one cause of death for women. And so you have people who become converts to Christianity, men and women alike, who say, I don't want to feed empire. That
Mm,
this empire is going down. We've read the end of the book. The empire, John at the end of the story gets this crazy revelation, and it's very similar to what it would look like to have Uncle Sam falling off the Wall Street Bull. The whole Babylon the Great woman going down is completely Roma personified. But he
sure.
can't say that because he's going to get arrested if he tries to say something like that, right? But his people, wink, wink, we know exactly who's going down here.
Right,
And
right.
so So, as you know, it's a form of rebellion, not with a chip on their shoulders. They're just like, I am not of this kingdom. I am of a different kingdom. And
Yeah.
so, the reason to have children is because death happens. There's a day coming when there will be no death. And that's
Mm.
why, there's no marriage in the kingdom. This is their thinking, which clearly does not make its way into a lot of Protestant thinking, right? And
Right.
so, I sort of had thought it was purity culture, and
Mm.
it was really, yes, it was purity, but it was very different motivation and it had a
Sure.
different manifestation. And
Yeah.
so none of that did I know, but I was fascinated then with my gender studies background to be reading, oh my goodness, I mean, this is very gendered,
Yeah.
but for very different reasons from how Western eyes in the
Mhm.
21st century would tend to interpret it. But
Sure.
it's so inspiring. It's so
Yeah.
inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, even one of the things that I've been able to do is reading the Gospels a lot more, reading these texts in a way that's almost been very independent
Mm,
of the usual interpretations and environments that I've
mm.
encountered scriptural texts. And one of the things that's just been really, I mean, just really kind of enervating has been okay, what does it look like today in a consumer capitalist
Mm.
society to take seriously when Jesus tells his disciples, I don't even want you to take a bag for bread when you go out.
Ooh, girl. Drop that bomb. Yeah.
Right? You know,
He's
what does
pretty
that mean?
countercultural, isn't he? Yeah.
Because it's like that goes against everything that we teach our
Yeah.
children. That goes against everything that
Yeah.
companies try to do. It is all about managing risk so that you don't run out of bread.
You're not
And
wrong. Yeah. You're not wrong.
so to think about what you were just describing in terms of these these new converts to Christianity, these early converts in the context of empire saying, we're not giving our bodies for that anymore.
Yes. Yeah. We're not. Different kingdom. What
Yeah.
has so many ramifications for our political moment.
Right.
Um, it really does.
It
No,
really does.
this kingdom is not going to be of this world.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. That is one of the things that just keeps drumming through my head is Christians are called to be citizens of another kingdom. Like that is
yeah,
just the
yes, yeah,
drumbeat that keeps
yeah, yeah.
going through me. So, okay, what does that mean?
We're with the embassy. Like we're representing that kingdom in this one. So you learn the rules of this kingdom. You
Right.
don't flip it off. Like you try to build bridges, but also you know which kingdom you belong to,
Right. Right.
which one owns you and which one cannot. Yeah,
Right. Right. And
yeah,
it's just interesting because it takes it takes a lot of discernment. It
yeah.
takes a lot
Ooh, yeah,
of
yeah,
it takes a lot of humility. I want to
yeah.
say strength, but I'm not sure if strength is the right word.
Courage.
Yes, that's the word.
Yeah,
What does
yeah.
that
I
look
mean, it's
like?
a form of strength.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. It looks different all the time. Sometimes courage means keeping my mouth shut. Sometimes it means speaking up. Sometimes it means weighing. I mean, you do weigh risk. You have to, count the cost of a house before you build it. But also, I have definitely, well, like when I published Nobody's Mother, I really didn't know. I didn't know where I was going to land. Like when I started the study, I was
Mm,
I was a curious student going, I don't know where this is going to take me. I got some hunches, but I really don't know. And I can't let fear drive where it takes me. That is
mhm.
not what a scholar of integrity does. And I've definitely seen that it's harder and harder to have integrity when your paycheck depends on a certain set of beliefs. Okay. And so to try to alleviate as many financial obligations, even
Yeah.
so that I mean, you have to be clear in yourself that, yes, I'm drawing a paycheck, but that doesn't mean that I'm giving in. But
Right.
I have to be conscious that it would be easier for me to.
Yeah.
And just weighing, yeah, it just means you got to have wisdom. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, one phrase for it is walking in the spirit, which we're afraid of telling people to do that because I think we're afraid, though, it's too subjective. But also, it is what we're called to do and ask, okay, today I'm supposed to do this. Yesterday I wasn't supposed to do the very same act.
Right, right. Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
2 things come to mind. I remember having a conversation with a young man, and he was very much in this, I don't wanna listen to the things that I want. I don't wanna listen to what I desire. And
oh,
and I was like,
yeah. But yeah, some of that's holy and good. Yeah.
yeah. And I thought, so it just really kind of forced me to go back, and I was like, but then I went and thought about, that text in Psalm where it says, "Delight yourself in God, and He'll give you the desires of your heart." And I really have been thinking about this walking in the
Yeah.
Spirit, walking with integrity.
He will form your desires. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like actually paying attention to the order of this text. Delight yourself in God;
Mm.
He will
Wow.
give you the
Yeah.
desires of your heart, and the desires of your heart follow wanting what God wants. But it's
Right.
also learning who you are.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
The glory of
Good
God.
word.
The glory of God is a human being fully alive, and a human being
Mhm.
is a unique creature. A human
Beautiful.
being is a
Yeah.
unique.
Ooh,
Each one of us
preach.
has
Yeah.
never existed
Yeah. That's right.
in
Yeah.
history. And so, what
Hmm.
does it look like to delight, desire, and walk in that tension, and figure out how to navigate
Yeah.
that? And but then doing that with
Mm.
integrity. You use that word integrity, and I'm fascinated by this word because I feel like integrity, authenticity, integrity, transparency, vulnerability, these are all words that are really kind of used a lot. I suspect we use them sloppily, and I'm curious about teasing out why. Why? What is it makes me suspicious of these words?
That's really interesting. Well, maybe
Yeah,
because so many people who claim to have integrity turn out to be living double lives. So, there's that
right. There's that.
tainting that
There's
comes
that.
with.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
goodness. Somebody, particularly in Dallas in the last 6 months, it's been referred to as
yes,
the unbuckling of the Bible Belt. It's just, oh my
yeah.
gosh, we've had so many scandals. And it's hard to know. Does this mean people are more corrupt than they used to be? Or does this mean it's safer to come forward than it used to be?
Mm,
I mean, maybe
yeah,
it's always been this corrupt, but people weren't
yeah.
getting caught until social media and tape recorders happened.
Right,
Who knows?
right.
But anyway,
Yeah,
I think so. You certainly tremble a little bit when you claim to have integrity. So I think you kind of alluded to it. So you've got two theological things happening here. You've got original glory, which means that you can have beautiful desires. My desire to see a mountain can be a beautiful thing, right? And it's part of who I am. But also, uh, we have that propensity to sin that can deceive ourselves about ourselves. But we
sure.
don't want to doubt every thought we have either. Like if I love to teach, that doesn't mean it's because I want a platform. It might really be because I was made to teach. And so original glory says, teach your heart out, sister. You were made for it. But the whole, human depravity thing goes, okay, but how you teach is really important. Are you
Mm,
teaching because you want to be popular? Or are you teaching because, you want to please people? Or are you teaching because, to your point, you want to bring glory to God?
yeah,
And the only way you can know that is by steeping yourself in who God is. And we come
yeah,
back to, so, I mean, that's why it's tenuous, right? Like, what is
yeah.
integrity? Integrity can be, yes, I'm going to take the job I love to teach, but then it can get corrupted by all the
Right.
bad things that can
Yeah, yeah.
infiltrate.
One of the things that I'm thinking about is the idea of that there's 4 aspects to how do you find and identify and choose a role model? Like, how do you find these people that are worth paying attention to? And, attention, like, where are you directing your attention to begin with?
Yeah. Yeah.
Proximity. What kind of
Yeah. Proximity
proximity?
helps. Yeah.
Yeah. And congruity. And I think that these are habits of trust, habits of
Mm.
being, habits like I think that these are things that we have to practice because
Mm.
how am I going to know if you have congruity? Like if your actions match what you
Yeah,
say, how am I
that's
going to know
true.
that if I'm not in
Proximity is,
proximity
yeah,
in some way?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I'm not ready to land on a final answer, but I'm not convinced digital proximity works well.
yeah. It's got its pros and cons for sure. So here's an example from the class you took. It
Yeah.
used to be in person and it
Okay.
got better. It's one of the few things that got better by adding distance students because in the personal classroom experience, when you're learning to be a writer, but you have an audience that's all over the world, what you don't want is only Southern white readers. And
Yeah.
so get on Zoom. We added students, excuse me, from Sydney. We added students from all over the United States. We had one semester where there was the Las Vegas shooting, and we had a student in Las Vegas who was on the front lines of
Mhm.
ministry. We had the same semester, Houston flooding, student on the front lines. Same semester, huge hurricane in Florida. And the feedback that came through from these students to their fellow students about getting rid of trite answers, getting rid of easy answers, or even having to have answers was
Mm,
much better than we had in just the classroom
okay.
embodied experience.
Sure.
And so it depends, right? Like we're not going to have communion, like literal, the
Right.
Eucharist by
Right.
distance. You're celebrating an embodied thing. And nothing replaces a hug. Nothing replaces a
Sure.
human touch. But yeah, I think it really kind of depends
Yeah. Yeah.
on. I've
Yeah.
also noticed that a lot of our international students who used to end up staying in Dallas, and we hated that. You're like, the whole point was you wanted to go back to your people. Well, now
Mhm.
they're going back a lot more because they have Zoom and can stay in touch with their people. In the past, the
Mm.
hole that they left got filled in. And then there
Yeah.
was no more space after 4 years when you get your master's and go back and,
Yeah.
they've moved on as they needed to.
Sure.
But by Zoom, by staying in touch with all those people on a regular basis and they know you're coming back, then people go back.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's pros and cons. When
Totally.
COVID hit and
Mm,
everyone all of a
yeah.
sudden had to all these people that we were used to seeing in the office or in person, the first few months, I don't know that I would have made it without a regular meeting,
Yeah.
like a Zoom meeting.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
That was just
It
how
was
we could figure out how to
cold
network.
turkey on
It was, it
embodiment.
was.
It was
Yeah,
brutal.
because I remember I had driven down to Florida for work 2 weeks before lockdown, and
Wow.
I had been on the road, and I had been listening to a podcast where they were talking about how do we handle this weird new virus coming out of
Wow.
China, and I was talking on the phone to my mom, and we were like, "Common sense, wash your hands, wash your damn hands." People,
Yeah. I
which is
did.
just advice no matter what. And then 2 weeks later, and
Wow.
then
Yeah.
everyone was like, "Now what do we do?"
Hmm.
So, yeah, Zoom, but it's also like there were already relationships in place
Yeah.
or
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so anyway, just trying to think through like how do you create the the connections that are necessary um, for genuine vulnerability. I have this theory
Mm.
that authenticity can be used as a shield. Oh, I've already been completely authentic in front of everybody. You
Mm.
can't use it against me.
Ooh, girl,
Stuff
girl.
happening
Yeah.
behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But I also wonder if maybe we use authenticity and when we mean transparency. I don't know.
Yeah. I think you're onto something there.
As you can see,
Yeah.
a lot of vocab lessons going on in my head,
Yeah.
a lot of
Mm.
vocabulary and definitions. But
Mm.
this question of integrity really, that is really what has kickstarted this whole project for me personally, is
How
just
so?
the, I remember one day when I was working at the seminary and one of my coworkers was like, "Oh, did you hear about so and so, a preacher,
Mm.
latest
Yeah.
preacher behaving badly?" And
Mm.
I remember looking back, it's even more strange to me now, but my reaction was like, "Well, of course."
Oh, wow.
Like I wasn't even surprised.
Wow.
It was just, "Well, sure. Why wouldn't they? Why not?" Because it was just
Mm.
one after another after
Yeah.
another. And I remember saying to my coworker, I said, "I don't know if this is hubris or what? But I'm tired of looking around and not finding people that I want to admire. So I guess I'm just going to have to become that person.
Wow. That's not a bad decision.
But
Yeah.
that's really what started off because,
Yeah.
it's not just the political, it's not just the
Right.
entertainment industry. I mean,
No,
all of those because we have omnipresent attention with all of the, communication channels that we have, media channels. But it was also just these pastors who were claiming leadership over a congregation or a group of people who are claiming to be an example of a very specific
Mm.
faith and a way of living and a way of being in the world, and who were doing absolutely not that. And it was just like, I'm done. I am done with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But okay, but I don't want to sit here and deconstruct. I am here to
Right.
construct something. What is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, small is beautiful. I mean, that's sort of where I'm landing. Small is beautiful. So there are a gazillion mega churches in Dallas, and if you're in a mega church, you either find your little community where you are known and you know them, and you can show up with a meal when somebody's sick. You don't
mm,
just show up and have a lecture and listen to a lecture and sit in the back of the room. Like that's not church. That's a lecture.
right,
That's a TED talk, right?
right, right.
So you can find community. We've actually plugged into, which for Dallas is like a church of about 125, 150, which is very small for
Yeah.
Dallas. But we plugged in there initially because our daughter is on the autism spectrum. And
Mm,
we wanted a place where everybody knew and understood and no explanation was needed. And she could sit with a 12-year-old or a 55-year-old and it was cool. You can't do that. I mean, she would call big churches we visited the mall. That was not going to work in our family, right? So I know there are ways to make it work. It was not going to
yeah,
work with our family. But
sure.
also, I think this is our first time in a church where there's no senior pastor. It's a preaching team. And
Mm,
the decentralized power is going to be I would have a hard time leaving this, having done it, because it's not it's
sure.
you're teach based on your gifting, but other people do other things based on their gifting. And
Mm,
when our daughter had open heart surgery, there was nobody who was assigned to visit her, so half the church showed up because everybody had the mentality that it's not somebody's job, it's the community's. And she looked at us and said, up till now I always thought these were your friends. Now I realize they're my friends too. Yeah, I know. It was. And it was true.
that's awesome. Thought of,
Oh,
yeah. But I would
mm,
love to know, but when Me Too really kind of broke,
yeah.
and then Church Too really
Yeah.
started to kind of crest after that, did that intersect with your work, or did that shape what you were doing at all?
Yeah, I'll tell you what really majorly more than that though was when the Supreme Court made the decision on gay marriage. My colleague in the counseling department and I were disgusted by some of the language that Christians were using to
Mm,
talk about people with same-sex attraction.
mm,
And I mean, words I don't even want to say, right?
right.
And we looked at each other and said, that's on us because we are training the next generation of leaders. But we don't have any class where students learn what's the difference between like queer and gay. There's
Yeah.
nowhere that we're learning that.
Mm,
And so what we knew, we ourselves were not the experts on
mhm.
each of those things, but we knew who the experts were. We knew who the trusted voices were. And so we created a course called Sexual Ethics, where
Okay.
every week it was a different lecturer on
Okay.
their area of expertise. In many cases, their own personal journey had led them to their expertise. So that put a face and a name in front of students instead of just a nebulous, topic. Many of them, we had a film that they watched on intersex and they were stunned, most of them, to discover that was actually a thing.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
had
Okay.
just all been lumped in together. And so that decision definitely intersected my life because then for the next 4 or 5 or 6 years, I was helping to co-lead that class until we
Okay.
had a student who came through and got her doctorate with a focus on sexual ethics.
Oh,
And then
wow.
I could turn it over to the next generation to do my part. The counselors still remain. And the reason I'm a media arts person, the reason I was coing on that was because every assignment had to have a media element, because that was the point. They were doing a bad job in public. So, for example, if they would have to respond to somebody on Facebook in a winsome way, and
Mm.
then send us a link to their comment and let us vet how they had responded.
Oh, wow.
They had to, one of the assignments was just when we're just talking about masculinity and femininity and the cultural influence, the culture's influence, go to a magazine rack like at Barnes and Noble's and you have to take a friend with you and try to figure out what's targeted to men, what's targeted to women, what is targeted just to anybody, what's targeted to gays. Can you tell the difference by the cover? But you have to do it in community. You can't just show up and
Okay.
process it in your head. You have to have
Yeah.
a conversation.
Yeah.
And so many people said, I had no idea how much the culture in general links purple with women. And, it's like, don't wear purple if you're a guy, apparently. And also, apparently, all the guys are macho men and, they're the Marlboro man. And they're like, I would have thought, quote, the culture was beyond that. That the
Sure.
culture, that it was like Christianity, the subculture that was sending these messages of pink and blue. They're like, yeah, no, wow, it's full
Yeah.
force.
Yeah. 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 I've been surprised. I've spent most of my professional career, I would say 90% of my professional career in American evangelical spaces.
Yeah,
But it has been very interesting to see how outside of American evangelical spaces, there are still such stereotypical
yeah,
gendered
they
expectations.
go. Yes, deeply. And we've really seen that like in the last year or two, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's just been like, excuse me.
yeah, yeah, yep.
Wow. Wow.
Anywho,
How did the student, like when the students, so the sexual ethics class that you started, was it an elective? Was it a requirement? How
it
did students?
was an elective, but we took it. It was one of the few. It's the only class I've ever done that was fully online. And then we would do some live nights where here is when the professors are going to be live on Zoom, and you have to pick one because we want to meet you face to face at some point. We were amazed. Shouldn't have been, but for an elective, it capped out
Awesome.
because students wanted the training.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. And one of the things I learned from our students was that the first year students said the first thing that people ask me when they find out I'm at an evangelical seminary is, what is their view on gays? What's your view on gays? And they're like, we don't get to that till the third year. Like, you know it's it's not really part of the theology
Right. Right.
classes. And we're like, well, if that's where the culture is and what people are curious about, then why
Yeah.
not get it the first year? Why not?
Yeah.
And so a lot of students early in the program said, I want
Yeah.
it now.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah,
I love hearing that because I think that was not my experience, like getting the chance to
yeah,
kind of dig into some of those other questions. Again,
yeah.
grateful for my time there,
Sure, of course, of course. Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Could I have learned
yeah.
some of the things I learned anywhere else? No. But at the same time, I remember it was interesting being at admissions at another seminary and people would be like, "So which seminary should I choose?" I was like, "Well, what do you want?"
Oh, yeah. That's a really good question, actually. Yeah,
I know. I know. I
yeah,
said, "It depends on what you
yeah.
want, what
It
matters to you,
does. Yeah,
you know." But
yeah,
it was also interesting because I would say sometimes if I felt like the person that I was talking with was able to hear it, I would say, I will be perfectly honest. And I think a lot of pastors might tell you this. I don't feel like what I learned in seminary well prepared me for ministry to actual people.
yeah. Sad but true.
And
Hence, learned sexual ethics at seminary. Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
There you
We're
go.
like, it's on us. Like if people are coming to us to
Mhm.
train how to lead the next generation, then we've got to train them how to lead the next
Yeah.
generation with the questions that the next gen is asking.
Yeah, yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things that has been, and I don't have anyone specific in mind, but just this general sense of I don't see a lot of people willing to hand off their power.
What do you mean?
Older, maybe we could look at
Mm.
Congress, maybe we could look at
Yeah.
some
Okay.
of
Yeah.
our
Yeah. 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 Okay.
churches, maybe we can
Let
look at
me.
some of our
Yeah.
institutions,
Let me
and
tell you a quick story to wrap this about power and a hard lesson I had to learn because I was one of the first women at an evangelical seminary and, now I have gray hair, so I've been there a while. And when I went on the first faculty retreat, there was only one other woman, and I thought she would be thrilled I was there, like the sisterhood. And I realized pretty early in the weekend, "Oh, you know what? I've invaded her space. She had it all to herself."
oh, interesting.
And then I heard Lauren Winter talking she was a seminar leader, and she was talking about how when she started in her, I think it was at Duke, she knew that she was like the youngest and cutest in the room and had the most stylish glasses. Okay. And enjoyed sort of that role. And then eventually somebody younger and cuter and more stylish came along. And she said, all this time I'd been complaining we didn't have more women, but I
Mm,
realized I was going to have to let go of that. And I had a mentor in my pastor's wife who had invited me to California to speak, and she honestly confided in me. This blew me away. She was an amazing woman, and she said, I was afraid when I brought you out that they would like you more than they like me,
oh, wow.
but I am determined to give away power.
Hmm.
And the combination of those three things, seeing what it felt like to be coming along behind for somebody who'd kind of been a door opener and then didn't seem to want to share the piece of the pie. Apparently they thought it was finite. And then having somebody articulate her own selfishness and realizing she was going to have to mature. And then having the words actually said to me about giving away power. And the combination of those three deeply, deeply impacted me in my view of teaching and what my role is, and that it doesn't come naturally to us to give away power, but
Sure.
having been the recipient of it, to just determined, determined, that this is going to be part of my legacy, is that I'm going to be the kind of person that gives away power because that's how it has to be. And
Yeah.
it never gets easier.
Okay. Okay.
It's fun to share power, but to actually give it away
Yeah.
and then walk away from something that you've done or developed
Yeah.
it's not that easy. Yeah.
No, it's not. There's been a lot of situations where I left a role having done some things that were genuinely interesting and helpful and different and really like worked for the department, and then found out through the grapevine 6 months later that completely dismantled.
Yeah, that's hard. That's killer.
My mom, are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm a 9. I'm a
My mom is an 8
Okay. Okay.
and I'm a 4. Interesting dynamic. When you need a kick in the pants, she's your girl. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's really brutal, but sometimes it's really
Yeah.
helpful. And she said one time, she goes, "You want to know how much they appreciate and how much they love what you did and how much impact you had?
Mhm.
Stick your hand in a bucket of water and pull it out."
Oh, wow. That's brutal. Yeah, that's brutal.
And you just kind of went,
That's really brutal.
"Here's the
Okay, mom.
balloon."
Yeah. Yeah. I could do that with a water balloon, mom. Here we go. I'm going to pop it.
But that
Okay.
has stuck with me, and what you're saying is really
Mm.
resonating as well.
Mm.
And it comes back to humility and that tension of integrity and really trying to understand your own motives.
And also decisiveness. Like
Mhm.
it's going to happen and I'm going to decide now. It's going to be hard and I'm still going to do it.
Yeah. Mm. Mm. Oh, this is so
Shall
good.
we end on that?
I think we should.
I think we should.
I would love to know. I have 2 questions that I always wrap up. I
Okay.
would love to know, what's been most helpful for you out of our conversation?
Well, that's a great question. I think the acknowledgement that we slap around words like integrity and labels, and it's worth taking a minute to unpack what we're
Mm.
really talking about and what that really looks like.
Mm. I love that. Thank you. And then the last question. What's the story of the best or the worst taco that you have ever had?
Oh, that is easy because I had a barbecue taco a couple months ago and I have tried to go back to the restaurant and I've gotten close and it's not the right one because the taco is not the same. But it was like a barbecued rib taco, and it was so the flavor was absolutely fabulous, but also it had a semi-crispy crust. And just the combination of the barbecue flavor and the texture, it was divine.
That
Wish I
sounds
had written down the name of the restaurant where I got that taco.
Was it in Dallas?
It was in Rockwall, Texas.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
There you go.
There you go.
What
Somewhere in
about you?
Rockwall,
Can I hear
Texas.
maybe your listeners already know. What's your favorite taco that you ever had?
Oh, what is my favorite taco? I would say the first time that I ever had fish tacos in San Diego.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And everyone around me thinks
Oh,
they're the grossest things, but a good
no. I
fish
had a
taco.
fish taco last week in San Diego. You are not wrong. You are not wrong. You are right. You
Yes.
are the queen with a K.
Yes. Yes. So my first fish taco was just
Mm,
so
okay. Yeah.
well, Dr. G, thank you so
No,
much. This was
thank
an
you. It's
absolutely
fun
wonderful
talking.
conversation, and I'm so glad we got a chance to catch up. And I loved
Yeah, me
hearing
too.
the work that you're doing. Where can
Thank
people
you.
find
Thanks for
you?
having me.
Yeah.
If they can spell my last name right, they can find me. So it's Glahn, not Gallahan, Glahn. So sandraglahn.com is my website. At Sandra Glahn. Author is where you can find me on Instagram. New on Blue Sky. I can't even tell you that very long URL, but just if you look for Sandra Glahn, you can find me on Blue Sky.
I will make sure to link
Okay.
everything in the show
Oh,
notes,
perfect. Great. And then visualmuseum.gallery. Love to
which
see
is
people there.
just amazing. I can't wait
Thank
to
you.
spend time with the women of the faith. That's awesome.
Thank you.
All
Thanks for
right.
having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you found something that resonated with you and that helps you become more hopeful, creative, and wise in your own life. Please share this with someone who you think would love this conversation, and like, subscribe, and leave a comment or a review to boost the show. Shalom.